Hello. This time I would like to talk about naturalization. Our company receives numerous inquiries from various organizations. The type of inquiries we receive is, can I undergo naturalization? Many customers want to know if they can be naturalized. Some want to naturalize now if possible, while others, who are not yet eligible, want to know how they can achieve naturalization. Well, aren't you in the same situation? Whether or not you can achieve naturalization depends on the need to correctly understand the conditions for naturalization. I would like to convey the conditions for that period. The general conditions for foreign individuals that I will thoroughly discuss in detail this time refer to those who are not married to Japanese citizens. In this context, this refers to Korean residents in Japan who are special permanent residents. It is about those individuals and not others. This is a discussion about foreigners in general, excluding those who are not foreigners. For example, it includes single foreigners or those who are married to other foreigners, such as couples who are Chinese, or couples consisting of a Chinese and a Korean. These individuals fall under the category of general institutions. Well, regarding children, it is not a problem if the couple does not have any children. This is a common question asked by married individuals. Do we all have to naturalize as a family? The answer is that it is possible for an individual to naturalize on their own. Therefore, it is acceptable for only oneself to undergo naturalization, while the spouse and children do not, and it is also possible for oneself and the children to be naturalized, while the spouse does not. Additionally, when a couple applies for naturalization, if one person meets the naturalization conditions while the other does not, the spouse who meets the conditions can still apply for naturalization, even if the other spouse does not meet the requirements. There is a possibility. The reason is that if one person receives permission from the institution, their spouse will automatically be recognized as a foreigner married to a Japanese person. In other words, they are a foreigner married to a Japanese. The following conditions will be relaxed. Therefore, if a foreigner married to a Japanese citizen meets the conditions for naturalization at the time of application, you can apply for naturalization. This concerns the naturalization situation for foreigners who are married to Japanese citizens. There is another video on this topic, so I would appreciate it if you could take a look at that. If the conditions are met, both individuals can apply at the same time. Now, first, I would like to look at the conditions. If the conditions are cleared, naturalization is possible. And while collecting the necessary documents can be quite challenging, please rest assured that naturalization will ultimately be granted. Now, I would like to take a closer look. First, we will examine the residency requirements. The residency requirement states that one must have an address in Japan for over 5 years, continuously. Simply put, it is about whether one has lived in Japan for more than 5 years. The key point is the term continuously, meaning that it must be uninterrupted for over 5 years. When we talk about continuity, what kind of things are we referring to as continuing? I will explain that. So, for example, if someone has lived in Japan for 3 years, then spent 1 year abroad and returned to live in Japan for another 2 years, this does not qualify for naturalization. It cannot be done. The residency is not continuous. So, in this case, the previous 3 years cannot be counted. Therefore, you need to live for an additional 2 years plus 3 years, making a total of 5 years. So, you will need to wait 3 years before applying for naturalization. Another important point is that you must have a work visa for 3 years, meaning the period of employment must be 3 years. Additionally, it should be as a full-time employee, not part-time, such as a regular employee or a dispatched employee. There is no problem, even if you are a contract employee. Well, it means that you have lived in Japan for 5 years with a good work visa for 3 years. Shall we look at some examples? Also, I was an international student for 2 years. I have been here 3 years. They can apply for naturalization. They lived in Japan over 5 years and worked 3 years, no issues. Person below was international student 5 years. Their work is mission. They lived in Japan 7 years. Yes, how about this person? This person cannot apply for naturalization yet. they need to wait another year and must work. The next points I would like you to confirm are regarding the residency expiration, duration of stay, and travel outside the country. I would like to confirm the number of days spent outside Japan during the 5 years. For example, for overseas business trips or childbirth abroad, those who have been out of the country for 2 to 3 months or more should be cautious. If you leave Japan for 3 consecutive months, your residency history and the time you spent in Japan will be reset and counted from 0. Additionally, even if a single trip is shorter than 3 months, if you spend a total of 100 days outside Japan within a year, the same result will occur, leading to a reset. For example, if you spend 2 months overseas, return to Japan for 1 month, and then go overseas again for 2 months. I returned to Japan. I also traveled abroad, and in total, I have spent more than 100 days outside Japan in a year. This will reset my residency history. So, when looking at the total number of days over the course of a year, it exceeds 120 days. If someone has been outside the country for more than 3 months, there are questions like, is it okay if it's for a company business trip? However, even if it is ordered by the company, it is not acceptable. Well, my visa hasn't expired. It hasn't expired, and although I haven't been in Japan for over 3 months, I've been paying rent the whole time, so is that okay? I also kept my resident registration, so is that okay? There are questions like that, but unfortunately, the answer is no. Even if there are company certificates and such, some things are just not acceptable. I hope for a reset. Also, for those who have lived in Japan for over 10 years. Having over a year of work experience is sufficient. For example, if you have 9 years of study as an international student and 1 year of work experience, that totals 10 years, which is acceptable. If you have lived in Japan for over 10 years, then just 1 year of work experience is enough. However, if you have not lived in Japan for 10 years, please note that you will need at least 3 years of work experience. Now, I would like to move on to the next condition. The next condition is, well, to be a saint, right? You need to be over 18 years old. Basically, if you are over 18, that's fine. Plus, having legal capacity is quite difficult, isn't it? Well, legal capacity refers to the ability to independently and definitively perform legal acts, which is a bit complicated. To put it simply, it means not being mentally incapacitated or a minor. In such cases, minors cannot apply for naturalization on their own. They cannot do so alone without their family. Please take note of this. Now, let's move on to the third condition. The third condition is essentially about whether the person is serious or not. Well, it's important to pay taxes properly and to have no criminal record, and that's the first thing. Regarding taxes, for company employees, it's about the resident tax. Also, when it comes to taxes, you will need tax certificates for your spouse as well. So even if you are paying your own taxes, you might wonder about that. Well, if the spouse has tax arrears, please be aware that the application cannot be submitted. There are 2 forms regarding resident tax. One where it is deducted from the salary by the company, and another where individuals must pay it at the local government office. When looking at the payslip, if resident tax is being deducted, there is no problem. However, there are cases where the company does not deduct resident tax, so for those working at such companies, they need to be aware of their own tax payments. It's about whether payments have been made or not. Of course, if payments have been made, there is no problem, but there are sometimes people who have not paid enough, so please be cautious about that. If payments have been made, that's good. If they haven't, please make sure to pay all your dues. I want you to be careful about resident tax. Yes, what I want you to pay attention to is the dependents. Yes, please check your own withholding tax statement. For example, if your wife or husband is working part-time, I think many people include them on the form. If they are considered dependents, your own taxes will be lower. So I believe there are people who include them. If the annual income exceeds a certain amount, you cannot unnecessarily enter or apply, even in cases where it cannot be included. There are some who are included, so at that time, it will be necessary to proceed with corrections, and you will need to make those corrections. Yes, as for other examples, it refers to those who have their parents from their home country included as dependents. There is no problem with having your parents from your home country as dependents, but the issue arises when those parents, after they have passed away, are still being listed as dependents. In such cases, when applying for naturalization in one's home country, documents from the home country are submitted, which can clarify when someone has passed away. If this information is not accurately represented, it could lead to contradictions in the unnecessary documentation regarding the deceased. Therefore, it is important to pay attention to these details. Yes, I would also like to talk about company owners. Company owners need to properly pay both personal taxes and corporate taxes. In the case of sole proprietors, they must also pay business taxes and other related taxes. Therefore, compared to regular company employees, company owners and sole proprietors have additional responsibilities. Please be careful, as it will be checked whether you are properly paying other taxes as well. Next, it is important to have no criminal record. In simple terms, this means whether you have ever been caught by the police. I think the most common issue is traffic violations, as many people drive. For those who do not have a driver's license, it may not be very relevant. However, traffic violations can be checked for the past 5 years. So your history of traffic violations will be reviewed. Well, 5 years ago, or more than 5 years ago, there were violations. I apologize for that. Let me get back to it. So, basically, if there have been no traffic violations in the past 5 years, it doesn't really matter. Since 5 years ago, how many traffic violations have there been up until now? Well, if there are too many traffic violations, I think it has quite an impact. As for people caught by the police for reasons other than traffic violations, I believe there are fewer, but I think there are still a certain number. For example, if someone got into a fight in the city or committed shoplifting, the legal proceedings must be considered. If the sentence has not been finalized, it will not count against the application. In such cases, there may still be opportunities for naturalization. Additionally, the 2012 amendment to the law has made it a significant point whether one is paying into the pension system. If you are enrolled in the company's employee pension plan, the pension contributions are deducted from your salary. There is no problem with that, but for those who are not enrolled in the employee's pension insurance and are instead contributing to the national pension, it is necessary to make proper payments. Many foreigners sometimes do not pay at all, but while the national pension is expensive, if you naturalize, you will continue to live in Japan as a Japanese citizen when you become an elderly person. I hope you can endure a little and pay, thinking of it as a future investment. Also, you need to enroll in national health insurance and social insurance, so it is necessary to pay those insurance premiums properly. For company owners, well, as a company, if it is of a scale that does not have an obligation to join the welfare pension, it is a condition that the company pays into the welfare pension. Therefore, it is necessary to properly complete the procedures for the company's contributions. Now, I would like to move on to the next point. Next, we will discuss the requirements for naturalization. It's about whether there is enough money from the income of the family living together to support life. Well, there are often questions like how much savings are needed to be okay. But honestly, it doesn't matter much whether the savings are large or small. What is more important is having a stable job and a regular monthly income. Please do not suddenly deposit 1 million or 2 million yen into the bank. It's rather suspicious, you know. So if you borrow from relatives or parents, even though there are people who can deposit money into your bank account, it's better not to do that. Please stop, really. It's about the bank, you see. The bank passbook will need to be shown to the Legal Affairs Bureau. So if there are strange deposits, like suddenly having 1 million yen, you will have to explain it. It doesn't matter if your savings are a lot or a little. It's better to be honest. Being honest is the best approach, and then there's that. Regarding monthly salaries, how much is needed? For company employees, an annual income of around 3 million yen is generally sufficient. This applies to full-time employees, temporary workers, and contract employees as well. However, for those who are currently unemployed, it is a bit difficult to apply. So, you will need to seek employment before submitting your application. Well, for company executives, the executive compensation is around 3 million yen a year to be eligible. Also, there are many questions about whether buying a house is advantageous for naturalization. The answer to that is that there is no advantage or disadvantage. It's perfectly fine to own a house or even to live in a rented place. It doesn't affect the examination at all. That concludes the requirements regarding oil. Now, let's move on to the next point. The requirements for nationality creation mean that by naturalizing in Japan, one can lose their original nationality. Since Japan does not recognize dual nationality, it is necessary to renounce the original nationality when naturalizing. Now, let's proceed to the next point. Next are the ideological requirements. Simply put, it means that one should not hold dangerous ideologies that could destroy Japan, such as those of terrorists. Now, moving on to the final requirement, Japanese language ability. It is necessary to be able to read and write in Japanese, not just speak it. The level required is that of a third grader in elementary school. If you have a Japanese language proficiency level of N3, I think there will be no problem at all. Well, there is a test. So what kind of test is it? When I asked customers, for example, it involves tests like converting hiragana to katakana. I have prepared a sample question, so let's take a look together. As a sample question, I went to the supermarket on a birthday, bus, and bought chocolate. Well, this is a test where you need to correct the parts written in katakana to katakana. This is about the level of difficulty. So, for those who feel that the level is a bit too high, perhaps you should work a little harder on your Japanese studies. If you find the problems manageable, then of course, you can continue without any issues. So, how did it go? Were you able to confirm the conditions for naturalization? So this time, there are people who meet the conditions for naturalization, but I think some may have to wait for 2 or 3 years. Next, I will explain the process of applying for naturalization. I would appreciate it if you could also watch that video. As for the naturalization application, it takes about 10 months to a year from the start to receive the results. So I think it would be good to proceed as quickly as possible. Thank you very much. Excuse me.